So Victoria will be maybe helping us think differently about the power of culture, and alongside expanding our understanding of what decarbonisation means. And alongside Victoria, giving a presentation today, we've got Lisa Berger today, which I'm just really delighted to be able to introduce Lisa. She is the co-founder of the Green Book and of Renew Culture, which is the Green Book's co-author. And today, Lisa is going to be talking us through the background to the Green Book initiative and its vision for continuing progress. So the Green Book initiative started in the theatre community during COVID, and it's created guidance and standards that have so far delivered a step change in theatre sustainability, both in the UK and across Europe. So the Arts Green Book, which was co-founded by the Greater London Authority and Arts Council England, has since been introduced. And the idea with this is to broaden the guidance to support the cultural sector as a whole, not just the theatre industry. So we are going to, we'll be doing that at about 9:15, hearing from Lisa. But before that, we've got about 5 minutes where we're going to go into breakout rooms, just to give us an opportunity to introduce ourselves to each other in small groups of 4 or 5. We've got a minute each to just say hi, to say who we are, where we're speaking from, maybe just very brief what our practice is, and then if you'd like to just have a quick kind of introduction to what decarbonisation is looking like for us at the moment, and we'll have a chance to discuss this more fully at 10 o'clock. So I think if you'd like to put us into breakout rooms for 5 minutes now, Laura, that would be fab. Welcome back, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone else to come back from their breakout rooms. Okay, I think we've got everyone back now. So I hope you got a chance just to say hi to a few people there. We are now going to move on to Lisa Berger from Renew Culture, who's going to be talking about Green Book initiative. And I'd just like to say how lovely it is to be joined by people from all over the UK, but also we've got declarers from Berlin, from the USA, and from Romania today. So that's really exciting. Anyway, without any further ado, over to you, Lisa.
Hi, everybody, and it's really exciting to be meeting everybody and talking today about the Green Books. I've got a bit of a presentation because we always find with these things that people are coming at it from lots and lots of different angles. So I hope across the next 15 minutes I can just share a little bit of what a whole heap of us have been up to in creating the Green Books. And really the important thing for me to kick off by saying is that absolutely this is a collective endeavour. Those of you who were involved at all with the Green Book, and hopefully some of you will have been involved in it, will know that it came out of the work of so many theatre makers and artists during COVID. And just kicking off, of course, everybody knows just how urgent a priority at addressing the climate emergency is. We've known about this for such a long time, and certainly from my perspective, and speaking as a perspective now, I was Executive Director and Chief Exec of the National Theatre. I've been at the National Theatre for 20 years. And certainly we had been talking for a long time about what we could be doing to play our part in addressing the cultural emergency. And like so many people in theatre, we wanted to make change, we wanted to do something, but somehow we weren't really finding the way in. And that's the background to the Theatre Green Book. In the first instance, it was COVID. We weren't, or many people weren't doing anything, not through choice, of course, but it was the opportunity to get together and talk about what we needed, what we felt we needed to make a step change in making change in theatre and the performing arts. And starting off with conversations, I think probably in the summer, this grew into the publication of the first volume, which was Sustainable Productions, because we felt at the time that actually it was only by really coming up with a methodology for addressing the work that we made and presented to audiences on our stages that we could really get into making a change. This being feeling that actually in relation to buildings and operations, there had started to be some change and there were a lot of resources, but we felt in terms of productions, there wasn't that sort of an overview. Launched at the Theatres Trust in September 21. It moved very, very fast because people were incredibly generous with their time in putting together the Theatre Green Book. The thing that we have absolutely found is that networks are the thing that has enabled us to move very fast and to make a step change. Network like this one, a fantastic way of exchanging ideas and improving practice. And the Theatre Green Book would be nowhere without that ability to exchange ideas. And the thing that struck us so incredibly quickly was the interest from all the way around the world, but particularly Europe, in there being translations of the Theatre Green Book, which is really exciting. Those are the translations that we have to date. And that gave us a map, as you can see, like that. Taiwan, Australia and Japan also translations. What we realised though was actually more powerful than just making a simple translation was to start to form partnerships. The DTHG in Germany were the first people who came forward and said, please, can we make a partnership with you? The idea being there that actually, although we're all approaching it from a similar point of view, theatre making in different parts of the world is different. It's not just a question of changing the words. There are some differences in thinking. And we also felt very strongly that actually by having local partnerships, there could be further and further growth. So if I'm moving on and it suddenly got stuck, which is not what it should happen. Yeah, this is Theatre Makers in Denmark. We went over to Copenhagen and are now busily launching a Danish Theatre Green Book. And another very exciting one, the European Theatre Convention have asked us to produce a Green Book, which will then get used throughout Europe. What's been particularly apparent to us as we have started making these translations and adaptations and forming more partnerships is the principles that actually, well, came behind the first Theatre Green Book and the Arts Green Book continue to be the same, which is that we need to be working together. There are so many of us with different, as I was saying before, different ideas. We need something that, well, we felt that we needed something that everybody could recognise. So the power of the collective, those are some of the organisations that contributed to the first Theatre Green Book and the Arts Green Book mentioned there. But also the guidance had to be practical. We haven't got time really to be reading lots and lots of different things. We want to come at this from the perspective of it being easy to adopt in people's day-to-day practice. But well, yes, because one of the things that really struck us as theatre makers was being sort of asked to reduce your CO2 emissions by 10% is quite a difficult, if not an anxiety-inducing thing to be asked to do. However much you might want to decarbonise, it can be very hard to understand what it is you need to do and in what order you need to do things. And for that reason, in terms of making it practical, that was very much the reason for saying that we want and did involve people from all the different disciplines in making theatre and working within an organisation where there is a building and there are operations to be thought about. So what we hope, and as I say, I use the we, that isn't me and Paddy as Renew Culture, this is everybody who went into pulling the Theatre Green Book together in the first instance, that it should be based on practical expertise, but very crucially use the science from sustainability experts. In my role as Exec Director at the National Theatre, I used to find I was quite overwhelmed with different people's ideas of what we should be doing first. So it was really helpful to know that there were sustainability experts involved. And finally, something that was methodical, really thinking about that for the same reason. You needed to know, particularly talking from an organisational viewpoint, that you were working on something that could make change in a way that could be rolled out, which took us in the world of theatre to thinking about breaking this challenge down into 3 areas: what you saw on stage, the productions, the buildings, and the operations themselves. And they're following on from that, the 3 volumes of the Theatre Green Book, and recognising that because people are at such very, very different levels, we've got theatres who are already working really at net zero at advanced level, and many who are thinking that even taking the first steps are going to be quite challenging. So we said, okay, let's work this challenge through, thinking first of all about working at baseline and moving through intermediate and advanced, so that at advanced we think people are pretty close to net zero. And inside there's the framework for planning. We hope best practice guidance for every area, the 3 standards, and a measurement system as well. And those are the 3 books. I'm taking too much time. I'm going to fly through, give you just a flavour of what's in. So productions, we've got to move away from this. Raw materials to stage to landfill. This is no way to be making culture on stages. And so within the Green Book, breaking down that challenge into thinking about how you generally make a piece of work, recognising the changes that need to happen at every stage in that journey, and who needs to be involved in doing what at every stage, because absolutely for sure, this is a completely collaborative process. We are not going to make art sustainably unless everybody does their bit. And then all of this, because it's all on a website, it links through to detailed guidance. The other thing I think that we all felt very strongly, so this isn't about telling people they can't do things, it's saying this is how you can make theatre sustainably. It doesn't all have to be just a bare stage and a single light bulb. Blues from Alabama Sky here, which was made to baseline sustainability. National Theatre of Scotland, National Theatre of Wales, all making shows to baseline all the time. GLA and Arts Council said, the volume on buildings, we think that could probably be rolled out to all cultural buildings, because really we're looking at all buildings which have audiences, visitors coming in and working with staff. So we did that, approached it in exactly the same way, which was getting together with groups of librarians, archivists, people, exhibitors in the film world, folk from the museums and galleries, to look at both the specific issues that affect them and their buildings, but also continuing to develop with the sustainability experts. And really drawing on this methodology that the first thing you need to do in thinking about making a building sustainable is to what's called be lean, so leak less in energy. That's all about insulation, etc. Then thinking about the plant and equipment that you're using being clean, again working through all the different areas of how you can improve your services systems, particularly your controls, so that the actual energy that you're drawing is also much reduced. This works in your home as well, and as also really applies whether you're thinking you've got a grade 2 listed building or you're in a you're in a shed somewhere. And then being green, that's the sources of the energy. The guidance in the book talks about these different forms of energy and how you might consider using them. And then the importance of supporting biodiversity. And it has a methodology within it which says that you need to sort things out between your easy wins, the capital and maintenance projects, and then the capital expenditure. As with the sustainable productions, lots of guidance in there and a link to a home survey tool, which anybody can go in, put in some details about their building, and then it gives you a plan which enables you to sort through. The bigger problem here is, of course, money. In that it's spending on your building that will really change how you can make it more sustainable. But, you know, quite frankly, we found that often just by using some of the addressing some of the low-hanging fruit, the easy wins, people can save a lot of energy by just thinking about those things like controls, reducing temperature, etc. So this is all the guidance that's in the book to support there. And then in operations, we're now back into the Theatre Green Book again. The biggest impacts in operations are, of course, travel, staff, visitors and audiences, and the management of waste. And you'll have understood by now it's the same system as with the other two volumes, breaking down across baseline, intermediate and advanced, who can and should be doing what, to move rather methodically through in terms of reducing energy. All of this also, of course, really involving comms to the whole organisation and hopefully to your audiences. So just as an example, in terms of travelling, making sure that people are doing all they can to make sure that audiences are aware of sustainable travel options. So I've told you that already, what the whole thing is. Carbon footprint, a big thing that we keep coming up with against. What we're saying in terms of the Theatre Green Book is that we feel we need to be encouraging people to look across those three areas of activity and to be changing their activity and changing their behaviour so that they are, we know, reducing their carbon. So with the productions, making them as sustainably as possible by moving from a linear to a circular economy. Productions is all about reuse and recycling. And then where you have to use virgin materials, making sure that those are responsibly sourced. Buildings make the sustainable as possible through better insulation, and running operations similarly as sustainably as possible. And then moving through, as I was saying, across those three areas from where people are today towards achieving net zero. With the European Theatre Convention, we are also looking at a form of certification and measurement for this. They are very keen that we should be doing that. And we are developing a methodology which says actually you can be measuring how much reuse and recycling that you're doing and your waste reduction and recycling, so that you end up with a measurement of carbon across all of those three areas, which can then be used on an annual basis to see how your carbon is changing. And we very, very much hope reducing. Particularly important for some of our European colleagues who have got very strong targets from cities in terms of hitting 2030. I mean, not just in Europe, obviously, we should all be doing that. And then those are the web addresses of www.theatregreenbook.com, artsgreenbook.com, info@artsgreenbook for any feedback. This is all free to use, and we are really so keen, all of us, particularly within the Theatre Green Book community, and we are very much a community right now. We've just formed an unincorporated association within the UK because we feel very strongly that bringing in more people into this, as I say, this Theatre Green Book family will just strengthen the 3 volumes that we already have and enable us to further develop those networks. That's it from me. Thank you. I think, have I stopped sharing?
You have, Lisa. That's great. Thank you so much. That was a whistle-stop tour through a huge amount of work that you've been doing, and theatres and other arts groups across the world have been doing. So thanks for that. We've got 8 minutes or so for questions. If anyone's got questions they would like to ask Lisa. If people want to wave a hand or put a hand up in the reactions, we can have a look. I can maybe kick. Alistair, yeah. What would you like to ask?
Hi, yeah, I saw that as fantastically interesting, and I've been working a lot with the Gallery Climate Coalition, been looking at exhibitions and things like that, but a lot of the same issues apply. And the more I look at this, and lots of people are looking at green exhibitions, lots of amazing work, but it feels to me like the critical element here is going to be how do we build pools of materials and resources which are modular that lots of people can use together. We have to get a bit meta about this, I feel, and it's like how do we build those things, because it's going to be lots and lots of different theatre organizations working together with the same set of materials for different productions, I think. And I just wondered, it was really interesting listening to what you're doing, and that sounds really amazing. I wondered how, I'm sure you've been thinking in those terms too. I wondered how you are approaching that kind of issue and what's out there as well in terms of that.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Inevitably, with a whistle stop, one can't talk about this. So I think there are different elements. One is storage becomes important, and knowing what you've got in storage, and then the opportunity to have shared storage facilities between a number of different organisations. And we've been looking at that. There are already a number that exist, either informally or formally. There are some, certainly again, within Europe, it's really noticeable where cities are saying this is a really important thing to do and are supporting that by putting money into shared storage facilities. But I think increasingly people are just taking action into their own hands and saying we have to do this, and that's where I spoke about networks being really important, and local area networks certainly working together to identify somewhere where there can be a shared storage facility. Also in the world of theatre, there's the idea that you have a shared IT system. God, sorry, my language has just left me, where people, rather than having to put everything into a building, people know what each other have. So the same sort of stock system, and then have either an informal or formal system of sharing and exchanging, which helps a lot in that regard. Yes, we've also been talking to the Gallery Climate Coalition. I think so much of what's in these volumes, apart from what's in the buildings volume, but also the approach to productions and operations completely applies to other areas as well.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I see we've got a couple more questions, so we've got 5 minutes or so to get through those. We've got a question first from Kath, and then afterwards from John. So Kath, go ahead, please.
I don't know if it's in your remit, but touring is my main question, and plane travel, and because plane travel seems to be one of the most yeah, how do you deal with that? There's still a lot of assumptions of the past in terms of travel and in terms of artists going different long distances.
Yeah, Kath, so our approach is to say we're not saying no to things, but we're absolutely saying this is how you can make it a lot better. Certainly again from the point of view of theatre, you can really think about, first of all, how much is being moved around. So do you really need to have, as first of all, moving as much set? Can you use things that are available locally? Can you reduce the number of vans by thinking about how the way the set and the scenery is moved? Do you need to move as many people? There's the show, the Katie Mitchell show recently, where the actors didn't travel. The actors were recruited locally. There are other simpler versions of that, where you say, you're using technical staff locally, you might be, or similar thoughts around that. And the other thing that I think is really strong is saying, to what extent do all those recce's, do all those design meetings have to happen in person? And to what extent, actually, now we're also familiar with Zoom, can those happen in this sort of a format, and exchanging information and tech specs rather than actually going to visit? There is quite a bit of guidance there all the time. We're trying to add to that guidance. We're just talking about an Australian Green Book, actually, and this is really important there, because, you know, there are countries where actually if you say no planes, then work can't travel at all, and that's tough.
Yeah, it's full of conundrums, isn't it? How to make this go forward.
Yeah, I'm Australian.
Yeah, just really quickly, I know that John, who is 4 o'clock in the USA, would like to ask a question. Please go ahead, John. You're on mute, John. You're on mute, John.
Sorry, I wasted that precious time. Sorry. Yeah, it's very exciting, Lisa, and thank you for this inspiring presentation. I was wondering if there were any, let's say, visuals or videos of people doing those things in step 3 that could be perhaps, you know, shared and made more, making the sort of catalyzing of these action plans more accessible. Cartoons, videos, photographs of people doing these things.
Yeah, that would be great. there are some. Yeah, I think this is one reason why we've sort of moved towards being an association and hopefully fundraising, to be able to enrich our website and our resources, because it's all about communication, isn't it? And reaching people in the way that is best for them to be able to respond.
It could be pretty crazy to have a performance of people doing those things as the narrative, you know, like a utopian kind of how-to. That could be quite.
This is, I mean, it's great, John, and this is exactly what Culture Declares and holding these gatherings is all about. It's about how we can start to make connections. People who have resources, ideas, can then link up, collaborate, make these things happen. So after this session happens, we will be sharing people's details, and, you know, to really try and encourage as much networking and collaborative working as possible. So
ours is all from the practical point of view. We know we can make change. That's the thing I believe about passionately. Working together, we can do it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. We are going to move on now to Victoria, who, Culture Declares is hugely grateful for all the work you do. But today you're going to be talking about how we can expand our understanding of what decarbonisation can mean.
It's lovely to see you all. I'm afraid I've got to jump into another meeting, but really good to catch up. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Lisa.
Bye.
Bye.
I was just trying to say thank you to Lisa with my mute off. On. Sorry, now I've put Skype on. Stop that. Hi, everyone. As Gabby said at the beginning, there are sort of 3 elements to this, the approach of decarbonising in Culture Declares, which is the technical, really important technical stuff that Lisa talked about. And then there's divestment. And then there's us as powerful storytellers you know, dissectors of the past, imaginers of low carbon just futures. And that's the critical and superpower that culture has. So I'm not going to talk about divestment, which is fantastically important in this conversation, but hopefully we're going to have another a session around divestment. But just to say, sometimes this is the massive stumbling block that organisations or people pushing for change within their organisations is divestment. But Culture Declares doesn't have any red lines in terms of you know, the money. It's about being willing to acknowledge the problem and share the problems within the movement. So, you know, if anyone's saying, oh, we can't declare because we haven't divested fully enough, come along and talk about it, because that's the first step, is acknowledging the problem, and that you are, you know, because it's massively complicated. So no red lines, but I'm going to jump into the other element, which is us as storytellers, and hope to get through this in 10 minutes. Can you all see? Oh, no, hang on. I need to put it on. Sorry, try again. Okay. Yeah, are you all right? Is that working? Cool. Okay, so of course the climate crisis doesn't exist in isolation from other aspects of the planetary crisis. So what I want to talk about is taking off our carbon blinkers, because if we purely see decarbonising as a technical issue, it's nothing about system change, and we neglect the other issues, which are gross inequality, resource conflict, all these lovely things, pandemics, displacement, stuff that we're experiencing now. We miss out on those, and we miss out on the power of culture as storytellers and examiners of the past. And there's a bit that I want to do is to explore. So is this showing as a? You're seeing everything, aren't you?
If you click on slideshow, it should work for you. Either the little slide at the bottom, or yeah.
Is that working?
No, if you go to slideshow and then go to start, play from
yeah.
start. Yeah.
Sorry, being stupid. Okay. So I'll share these with you after, because I'm not expecting you to digest this sort of slightly complex diagram, but it's really just to show we need to take our carbon blinkers off. So this really shows the climate crisis is here. There's all this history, which starts with colonialism. And we can see from this side how climate crisis is linked to imperialism and colonialism. And I'm speaking here from the position of a white Brit. Clearly others with different positionality are going to tell this story differently. So through the historical processes of colonialism, i.e. physically taking control of the countries, and imperialism, imposing Western political economic systems on non-Western countries, Britain's economic and political systems have been replicated globally. And they have contributed to the climate crisis. And it's centered on indefinite resource extraction and growth and carbon intensive production models. Crucially, this understanding involves us thinking and seeing the climate crisis and its solutions as technical. It moves us from seeing it as a technical problem to one of culture. And how decarbonising links with decolonising and puts justice in the frame. And it shines a light on our particular space we occupy as cultural workers and artists and creators in our powerful role as storytellers. We have a role that is about examining the past, dismantling what's been happening in the past, why we're in this situation in the present. Some of the impacts of climate are baked in, so it's providing culture and care in the present. And then the big thing is modelling and imagining better and more regenerative, just futures. All these aspects are, aspects of culture. And we have enormous power as creatives in addressing, the past and the present and imagining better futures. So Lisa talked about storytelling, and this slide comes from another, I can't remember if it was an offer or a breakfast, but it was a piece of research done by an organization called Indigo, and I'll put the link later, or we'll send it out to you. So this is where your storytelling starts. It's, if you're doing this work, tell your audiences, tell the story. In this piece of research, 25% of audiences didn't know what the position of their the cultural organizations or practitioners were. And during the research, 95% of them didn't mention anything about it on their homepages. So, if you're doing it, even if it's teeny steps, start telling your audiences about it, because that's where your storytelling starts. So I'm just going to go through some examples of what look like good practice. So when we're integrating storytelling in our creative outputs, we're modeling the values of low carbon just futures and low waste systems of organising, and placing care and sustainability at the core of our practice rather than extraction and profit. So this, some of you might know about it, it's a production of Furthest and the Furthest Thing, which is a story about a volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic, and the community there had been undisturbed for centuries, escaping the threats of modernity and capitalism. And it's basically a story about colonialism. But what the young Vit did is they told the story not just through the play, but through how they created the play. So every aspect of this, of the physical aspects of this show, were recycled and recyclable and low carbon. And that was a very clear message through the production. So they started to integrate not just what they're doing within their operations of the building, but also in their storytelling through their creative outputs. And the next example is also the wonderful Royal Court, who've got this kind of nailed. So they have a very impressive sustainability policy that's based around the UN sustainability goals. So we're not just talking about energy and decarbonising, we're talking about all the aspects of just and regenerative and low carbon just futures. So as you can see, that their ethical commitment to sustainability is embedded and echoes their artistic commitment to social and political, challenging social and political orthodoxy and hegemony. So that's again how you can see cultural organisations not just walking the talk, but they're telling the talk and walking the talk through their cultural and creative outputs. So there's another example. This is a gallery space of the Scarborough Art Gallery called A Space to Be. So this was interesting. It was a recognition that we were losing our civic spaces, and it was started after COVID, and as a kind of way of bringing audiences and communities back into the space, but also in response to the fuel crisis. So it provided a warm space, again, at the same time as looking at their carbon footprint. They were providing a warm space and acknowledging the fuel crisis that was going on. And then it's also modelling, it's based on principles of reciprocity. So it's very openly and self-reflexively, it's principles that drive it are based on reciprocity and giving, as opposed to sort of extraction and transactional kind of ways that we operate in. And it does a various kind of hands-on community engagement, but has those narratives and those discussions within the space. So it's providing a sort of practical response to the fuel crisis and integrating various narratives of storytelling and basing its whole kind of ethos around, a different way of being and organising, which is all based around reciprocity. So that's another interesting example to check out. And this final one is an organisation called Black Butterfly, who again sort of model low carbon living and foreground care, and working towards a sort of regenerative community, embedding culture and creativity to explore alternative ways of being. So they are a Afro-descendant-led organisation who provide care for and food for displaced communities and lower income communities, but also embed sort of culture and storytelling within that. So you can, and their spaces are all kind of very much looking towards different models of being that embed low carbon, different ways of being than our sort of high carbon extractivist world that we inhabit. So another really interesting example of sort of walking the talk and using creativity to imagine better futures, but also doing it and providing the care in the present. It sort of comes back to our role as cultural practitioner, which is to join the dots and tell the stories, examine the past and provide care in the present for baked-in impacts. And I was, I don't know whether some of you have followed the Beyond Growth conference. So there's a young activist called Anuna De Weaver, and I was really struck by her final speech, which basically talked about storytelling and counter stories to the mainstream, ones that tell, and this is her, of radical abundance, a world in which many worlds are possible, with an economy that serves our needs, a society that celebrates our differences, inside a new paradigm that feeds our soul. We are fighting for freedom, not the superficial freedom to work in jobs to sell things nobody really wants. We fight for the deep freedom to build meaningful lives without depending on growth. And I think that's the stories she's, promoting, and hoping that, I hope that we as cultural practitioners can use our powers of storytelling to help support, reach that alternative way of being. And every sort of act of cultural creativity is a sort of act of cultural defiance and an act of creation. So I just wanted to talk about that in parallel with these very important aspects, technical aspects of decarbonising our practice, so we can acknowledge that within the cultural sector. And I think that's all I've got for now. So let's just stop share. There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Victoria. That was really.
It was like gallop through. I probably ended up doing it faster than.
It was a gallop through, but it means that we've now got 5 minutes. If anyone would like to kind of ask Victoria a question or reflect on what they've seen, and then we've got a further half hour to kind of expand the discussions. But if there's anything directly related to Victoria's talk there, please stick your hand up. It'd be good to hear from you. So Kath has just asked on the chat whether there is a website for Black Butterflies, and maybe you can kind of tell us a little bit more about them, Victoria.
Yeah, there is. So I guess we can share that with when we send out the notes post meeting. Yeah, they're based in Hastings in St Leonard's, I think, and they have various community hubs. And again, it was started, I think, in response to the acknowledging the food crisis and the difficulties of displaced people by a group of Black and brown people, and using their own, cultures and knowledge about food and growing to provide, safe spaces and food and storytelling around their own cultures. And I think they have now 3 or 4 hubs. They act as a food bank and place, you know, a creative community space. They just seem a really interesting model to address, you know, some of the other aspects of the planetary crisis that if we only focus on, you know, decarbonising in the sense that it's a technical exercise, that we'll never address the justice and the other aspects of the planetary crisis. So I think the thing is that, you know, Culture Declares is a movement, and it is about systemic change, and leveraging the power of the creative sector as storytellers and, you know, catalysts within that.
And have you noticed things changing since Culture Declares has kind of come on board and started talking more about this, Victoria?
I think so. I think there's certainly an understanding of planetary crisis and you know, all the aspects of it, and how decolonising, you know, is embedded within decarbonising, and how, you know, when we look at our pathways to action, none of them exist in isolation to one another. If you're looking at, you know, if you're looking at the crisis with your cultural lenses, rather than, you know, this, you know, climate change is just here, it appeared out of nowhere. I mean, you know, this is why we're sort of funneled through this with these climate blinkers, that if we go sequestration and we lower our CO2 outputs and we aim towards net zero, we'll have solved the problem, which, you know, clearly isn't the case, and that isn't about system change. So I think, as, you know, cultural practitioners, it's always worth, when we have these conversations about decarbonising, to think about, you know, what is it about culture and creativity and artists who can catalyse a more kind of fundamental change.
And is Culture Declares going to be doing a bit more work, or do I understand there are going to be workshops about decolonisation coming up? Yes, and we're really looking for examples of good practice, or people who are interested in exploring that ideas, because, you know, it's obviously we are pretty much, as we can see from here, you know, a white organisation, and, you know, we constantly have that challenge of how we diversify, how we decolonise as a movement. So yes, I think in the not too distant future, we will be having some conversations about decolonising. There's an idea, if anyone's interested, we're doing a collaboration with Complicité, with a film called Can I Live, which is a black man's journey through the UK, looking at the challenges of climate and ecological emergency from his perspective. And Complicité are licensing the film along with Bicycle Power, with a view to sort of building generating networks and communities in place-based communities. So we're collaborating on that. If anyone's interested in that, please get in touch with me, because we can roll that out, you know, as and when. Thanks so much, Victoria. So that's kind of the end of the first bit of our session, the main bit. We still have half an hour left to open the conversation up to us as declarers, to kind of have a bit more of a chat about where we're at with decarbonisation in our practice or in our organisations, and you know, any problems. What are the barriers to us doing more, to going further, and you know, do people have ideas or ways that they found of overcoming, you know, barriers that people might be coming up against? So it's fine, obviously, if people need to leave now, that's great. If you'd like to stay on, that would be fantastic to have you here for the next bit of the session. We will be sending out notes from this bit, and the recording will be made available on the Culture Declares website. But thanks so much for being here for the first bit, and yeah, please feel free to stay for the next half hour. Yeah, so Victoria, I think you said that you were happy to kind of hold this next bit. I might write some notes as we go along, because often this learning can kind of be useful to share onwards. So yeah, over to you, Victoria.
Yeah, so I'm just going to pop the question in the chat. So yeah, it's just an opportunity to talk a bit more broadly about, you know, what you're doing, what the challenges are, you know, aspects of your work, how you might tell the stories, integrate your creative output with, you know, some of the narratives we talked about today, and connect with audiences. And whether that can be in your, you know, personal life and your cultural life, your individual practitioners. And what do you find might be barriers to that? John?
No, I simply wanted to introduce you guys to the Tuning Fork, which was our program generated during COVID lockdown time, which was a low carbon impact community building program. We've interviewed over 40 cultural activists and collectives around the world since the lockdown in 2020. And the format is the Zoom right here, this format, as a way of creating a low budget, low carbon impact community building kind of format. So that's all. We have a program once every month, and we want to invite everyone to be part of that, of course. But it's just the idea of a method and a format to you know, catalyze more community and networking, literally with low impact through the virtual digital format. That's it.
Yeah, thanks, John. So you asked whether, so this is something that takes place online. Are there recordings of some of your sessions? Or?
Yes, everything is on our website, and also branched off to YouTube and Vimeo. So
Yeah,
everything is on our website, and we also want to list, of course, on our resources page, the work that Lisa's doing and other people. So yeah, it's on our website, and we just had a recent show with a Tibetan singer activist, quite internationally known. Beautiful program. So
great.
also we'll invite people here to be a guest on our show as well. We can talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it'd be great if you can share your website link in the follow-up notes.
I'll link directly to the episode's page. Thank you.
And actually, maybe Victoria, it's a good time to say that Culture Declares, what we really encourage declarers and kind of linked organisations to get in touch, because we can share stories of decarbonisation stories and you know, stories of work that people are doing to address the Earth crisis through our social media platforms. You know, as an invitation for people to get involved, or you know, in any way that might work to promote the work you're doing, to help people, you know, through being inspired through the work that each of us are doing, and to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, we have it's a Culture Takes Action hashtag. So if you use that hashtag, it appears immediately on our website and will be amplified by our social media coordinator. And it's also a way that we can gather those stories, because we have a funder, the Gulbenkian, and we have a kind of story of change evaluation process. So all the stories we can gather provide, you know, the impact evidence for those funders, and also obviously not just to please our funders, but to sort of share the as Gabby said, to share our actions and progress and creativity. So where's everybody based? Margaret.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much. This was very, very interesting. I'm based in Amsterdam. Yeah, and I actually have a question about what you just shared, the link to Complicité. So this is a film, if I understand correctly, because it says book tickets now, but this is this like in a theater, or how is that?
So, yeah, Can I Live is the film that we're partnering with Complicité, so we can, they've offered the film up for screenings. So if you're interested in screening it, and they can provide, in the UK, they can provide sort of bicycle power, and maybe Fenty, who's the subject of the film, to come along and sort of facilitate or host a discussion afterwards.
Okay, thanks.
So Sophie, where are you based?
Hi, I'm in Hampshire, near Andover.
Okay.
And work for Chapel Arts Studios, which is a socially engaged visual arts organisation.
Okay, cool. And how do they have, you're making steps towards decarbonising or addressing some?
Well, at the moment, we're trying to track our carbon footprint. We're a very small organisation. There's only about 5 of us on our team, but we work with a network of artists and lots of different communities, like social prescribing groups or youth groups, or through visual arts. But, so I think from what I've gathered through working with, what's key to the organisation is inclusion. So I think that's a really strong point for the organisation. I'm fairly new,
right.
But yeah, they've probably got some ideas or good tips of how to move forward, but have to discuss with the team. Maybe work. And one of our artists in our associate group, actually, he introduced us, sent us the link to this breakfast session.
Great, it's good to see you here. And Paula, remind me where you are.
I'm in Weston-super-Mare, and I work for Culture Western here, but I also work for Diversity.
Okay.
Who are not really based anywhere, but sort of southwest. And for them, it's all very much about the social justice angle, because as an organisation, that's what they kind of exist for, to improve equality across the arts and theatre in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's tying the two together. I did find, so we're quite good at our carbon footprint. We're sort of using all the tools to look at that. What's been interesting for us is where that intersects with accessibility sometimes, and we have to make different choices, like not always the lowest carbon, and we have to try and treat our people really as they need to be to do what they need to do. We've got lots of people with lots of needs that we're touring with, and so it's just not always that simple. It doesn't come down to the lowest carbon. So I think we're really interested in that social justice angle and how that all comes together.
It's all part of that sort of just transition conversations. It's interesting because I was having a conversation about colonialism with some people from Middle Europe, and of course it's a very different conversation for them, because in effect they're catching up with the kind of the quality of living in the West, and there's a lot, it's the similar conversation to those of the global South. Why should we not have the same benefits that those in Western Europe, and that's the sort of issues around just transition, but also about storytelling. I think about is that really what you want? It's not sustainable, and they're very we can have different sorts of quality of life. Obviously, it's not direct parallel with access, but same sort of interesting nuanced kind of conversations about justice. So are you all declarers?
You know, I'm not even sure. I think at Culture Western we probably haven't. I did quite a lot of work with music declares
Oh yeah.
3 years ago. So I think that sort of stopped me in a way, or us from actually getting on with doing cultural declaration, because we kind of did the musical one. But we're about to have a name change, so I'm wondering whether that will be a good moment to do it. We're going to be super culture, so
Okay, cool.
so if you've got the word super in your town,
Yeah.
probably is it. So yeah, so at Culture Western we'll probably do that. Diversity, I don't think we are either. So work to do there.
Yeah. No, not everybody who sort of is engaged with the movement is a declarer, but just interesting. It looks like we've finished early, which never happens.
I mean, I guess, sorry, I just want to put something in here, which is because I'm an independent artist, networks like this are kind of really key to my feeling of what I'm doing, decarbonisation wise, because it's, you know, I work from home, you know, I'm pretty low impact in the art that I make, but I guess it's through volunteering with Culture Declares, through kind of activist work, that I guess I'm kind of decarbonising my practice in a way, and but equally it kind of feels that the barrier to me is it's almost like that there's a barrier to creating work. It's getting that balance between being able to create and the consumption that is involved with creating, and wanting to be, as you know, my footprint to be as small as possible, to so there is, yeah, that it's a really difficult thing to get that balance right, to enable me to still feel like I can create and use materials and travel and blah blah blah. I don't know if other people have kind of wrestled with the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that, Gabi. I'm not an organization, I'm an individual artist. I do work with John and Emily, the Institute for Cultural Activism in New York. But I just started a few weeks ago an Art for Impact course at my studio for a very small group. And my feeling is that there's a lot of interest from people who are not working directly in the arts, how artists are, you know, how artists work and how they think. And some people, or more people, are beginning to understand that they can learn from artists. I have someone in the group who's the director of an academy. It's called the VUCA Academy, VUCA. And they are talking to big companies about how to make change and how to tackle problems that have to do with uncertainties and ambiguity and so on. So they are looking at the arts. And as an artist, I feel that perhaps you know, sharing with people how we work, about our processes, our research and so on, perhaps in the long run might be a really good way, instead of, you know, producing objects that have to be transported, and instead of like anticipating in this star system, you know. This might be a really good way to, you know, to share with community and with the world our knowledges.
Yeah, I think that is a really key point, isn't it? Because, you know, as Victoria was saying, we are storytellers. arts creativity can reaches people in a way that the hard science and kind of hard politics doesn't, you know, reaches that visceral level, that you know, that emotional engagement that actually then motivates greater change. Yeah, and I guess, you know, it is that network thing, isn't it? That as individuals we've got powerful voices, but together, you know, we can press for the structural systemic changes that need to happen, and we just need to get better at learning how to come together to make those, you know, to make our power as a collective felt.
So Gabi, if I wanted to get in touch with you, how would I get in touch with you? Through the organization, or how does that work?
We can share people's contact details on the notes. If people have put their you know, their web links or their declarer links, profile links on the chat, then those will then come up in the notes.
Okay, great.
I can put my email in the chat as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have there's a mixture of organizations and individual practitioners, and we try and kind of hold conversations for both, you know, at different levels. I think this attracted a number of organizations because of the Green Book people, but, or, you know, different people have different kind of, you know, navigating their way through, like touring theatres, very different kind of challenges sort of flagged up. And then individuals, again, have a different kind of experience of the topic. John?
You know, I so respect Margaret's point of view. Of course, she's our colleague and collaborator and dear friend. As you know, we all share this kind of ethos about the impact that we're having as we try to communicate, you know, positive messaging and empower community. So there's a conflict inherent, of course, if you are going to make a larger carbon impact. What is the benefit? What possible benefit is there? How do we measure the balance? Of course, that's this nuance of, you know, we live on 6 acres of land here, which is our institute, but I drive a snowplow that consumes, you know, petrol, you know, based fuel to plow the snow to enable people to come here, etc. So there are all these inherent kinds of, you know, contradictory elements as we've been going forward for decades, trying to communicate positive messages and engaging community. I don't think we should overlook that we're in this sort of binary problem of one scenario developing as another scenario fades away, you know, the fossil fuel industry, the corporate narrative as well. So we can't exclude, I think, unilaterally, not shipping our artwork, not traveling in airplanes, not spending $200 million on a film that talks about, you know, the indigenous massacres that occurred, you know, here in America, you know, in a new film by, you know, Martin Scorsese. This money and this impact, what's the payoff?
That's the key question, isn't it? What's the payoff? Absolutely. And that probably, that's what people need to be asking with everything, I guess, they're involved with making. And sometimes, you know, often the payoff is worth it. And often it isn't. And we have to be better at sacrificing those things when the payoff isn't worth it, and better at acknowledging and being prepared to not do those things, I guess.
Well, Gabby and Victoria, you know, here we are. You, Culture Declared Emergency, has created a potential forum to clear up and to have a brainstorm. Well, should we do this? What is the payoff? Maybe there's a beautiful context and environment here to discuss these things openly and humbly, because we don't individually have all the answers. It's only going to come from community. One of the things that we're trying to do, Institute for Cultural Activism International, is identify a network globally and at times explore, can we activate this global network to create a low carbon impact art event that can have impact and large payoff without leaving our homes? I mean, without leaving our region, for example. How can we regionally have an impact that will have a global effect, a larger, if you will, a domino effect or tipping point effect, voila.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess this is, we're talking about doing local assemblies, aren't we? Cultural assemblies, and I guess that is kind of the point of them being a regional thing, Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the way that Culture Declares is structured is, based around localism, and then providing these forums to share, like John said, share the dilemmas and the kind of dissonance around, those questions. But yeah, I mean, the reason we organise locally is, people are more likely to engage in local issues because they're relevant and they feel able to make change in their regions around questions that affect broad parts of the community. And also it is a low carbon, way of organising. So yeah, localism and networking, is at the heart of Culture Declares also. So you create this sort of mycelium networks that can sort of tip over, make culture shifts potentially. We all struggle. It's hard work that we do, struggling with just the kind of dilemmas you've talked about, John. And also it's a way of attacking us, isn't it, as well? That sort of, hypocrisy, trying to cut the outside the popular media, cut people down is, how did you get here today?
Look, yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting, the whole notion of hypocrisy, because the very nature of what we do as creatives, we are putting ourselves or our work on a pedestal to be looked at, listened to, assessed, whatever. So it's a dangerous place to be if you don't want, if you're not prepared to kind of take those accusations, and it's tiring, and I think that's why there's a lot of burnout as well.
Yeah, which is where the kind of self-care and mutual care is important.
Which is part of that's one of the pathways to action as well, isn't it?
It is, and it's also, the heart of these sorts of communities is, having a safe space to acknowledge some of these challenges and to be supported.
I don't want to generate an adversarial spirit or atmosphere. In fact, that kind of defines how we're working with our projects in this non-adversarial space. But at the same time, there is this corporate agenda and programming that solidifies the idea of self-importance, which inevitably becomes aggression and competition, violence and destruction, and the annihilation of each other, other groups, natural resources, at all costs, continue to consume unconsciously and continue to express my self-importance, your self-importance, because that's built into the corporate strategy. So I think we have to work through these things, and one way, of course, is as you've said, self-care, self-nurturing, respect of the mental system, and regenerating that so that we are more capable of working, but also working as community, because that's the real power, and that's the power that's intentionally broken by our existing, narrative controls. So create a new narrative, create new narratives. That's, I think, what we can do, and enable and empower a sort of more conscious synergy and collaboration. So that's why I felt so compelled to declare and very motivated to create a hub, because that's what Margaret and Emily are already about,
Yeah, well, it's terrific. We're so glad you've joined us. And I think it kind of leads us back to why I really wanted not just to allow the decarbonising conversation to happen, in isolation to the other narratives, because, that's that bracketing off. Or we'll just let them see the carbon thing, and then we can, as a way of controlling the narrative and, avoiding systemic cultural change. And the cultural sector are ideally placed to take on those, that storytelling part of, activism. So while all the stuff around the Green Book is massively important, it's also important not to allow it just to be a technical exercise.
I